Hey folks, Kouto here. I did a video a few days ago where I analyzed Project Robot that is being done by Gen Design, which is a company that is being led by Fumito Ueda, with a lot of people from Team Ico that have developed games like Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, and The Last Guardian, and I do have to say, your response was amazing. I've actually been thinking a little bit more about this trailer, reading your comments, and taking a lot of your feedback, and I wanted to go back in again and talk about certain points and clarify some aspects. And those are going to be, is there a timeline, and does it even matter? I'm going to discuss, once again, this concept art. I'm going to discuss a little bit more about the purple explosion. Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli are just a must when it comes to discussing Fumito Ueda's work, in my view. Manzi Garcia is a surprising addition here, and Japanese mythology, and yes, that is Okami. And okay, let's get into it. A lot of people were pointing out in the comment section that I was looking too much into the sorts of stuff of, is this game a prequel to Shadow of the Colossus or not, right? A lot of people mention, and they're right to mention, that this is not what these games are really about. And I have to agree. I mean, you are absolutely right to say this, right? These games, The Last Guardian, Shadow of the Colossus, and Ico, and most likely Project Robot, are not really about, world building or lore or anything like that. It doesn't really matter what is the order of sequences in the timeline of these worlds that Fumito Ueda created. At the end of the day, these games are about humanity. These games are very much about the connections that we build with our community. And that without that, it doesn't really matter how big your castle is. It doesn't matter how much power you have in general. If you do not have people around you, you basically have nothing. Ico is very much a game where you constantly need to hold on to Yorda in order to advance. Do not let go is kind of the message. While Shadow of the Colossus is actually the opposite. It's a lesson of you need to let go. You need to learn when to let go from the people that are no longer here, or else you will do unimaginable things that you wouldn't even expect to make. In that sense, Wander, the Queen, and the Master of the Valley of The Last Guardian are very similar to each other. These were or are people that were unhappy with their lives, and they tried to do everything in their power in order to maintain a reality that is no longer there. And so they ended up doing some really fucked up shit. At least that's how I view these games. But I think at the end of the day, when you learn about those games, when you experience them, sometimes you really get deep into the lore and the world building. That's just how it goes, man. You really want to try and understand as much as you can from it. You want to make sense of it all. I did kind of the same with Dragon Age Origins, right? I loved the characters and I loved the overall story that was being delivered. And then after that, I really wanted to know more about the world and the lore. Is there a timeline? Does it even matter? No, it doesn't. And most likely there is not going to be an official timeline. Even if it's true or not, it doesn't really matter. I just like to speculate accordingly. And I'm going to speculate. So if we consider Shadow of the Colossus to be year zero, okay? We do unfortunately know, I say unfortunately because I wonder if Fumito Ueda doesn't regret saying it, but we do know from him directly from an interview that Ico comes after Shadow of the Colossus. In a timeline sort of sequence, we have no idea what is the distance between these two games in terms of years, right? If you ask me, I suspect that, most likely at the bare minimum, a couple of decades have passed. So I'm going to put at the bare minimum, it's going to be 100 years after Shadow of the Colossus. Now, The Last Guardian is a bit of a mystery. But if you ask me, I would put this game a little bit on front of The Last Guardian. It feels that way to me at the very least. I would honestly not even put a date to The Last Guardian because it's really hard to tell. The Last Guardian is pretty advanced when it comes to technology when it compared to Ico, so that's what I'm going for, but it's really hard to tell. Project Robot seems, at the very least from what we have, seems to be way in the past. Way in the past. Yes, I believe it's a prequel to Shadow of the Colossus, but it's way in the past. It's not right before. No. I'm talking about 15K years before plus, right? This is, I feel like Project Robot is the Atlantis of all of these games that came after. all of us know about Atlantis. Atlantis is one of the greatest legends of our history. Atlantis was a huge island right in the middle of the Americas and, Europe and Africa. And it had a massive civilization that was technologically super advanced. But during a cataclysmic event, this whole island went down and disappeared completely. And I truly believe that this tale is going to be something along those lines. And I might be dead wrong. Right now, that's what I believe. Okay, I want to talk next about the concept art. In my last video, I did not have the full picture of this concept art. I was actually missing this robot, but we do have confirmation here that yes, there are going to be multiple robots scattered throughout this land. I am still very confused about this picture. A lot of people pointed out that this is potentially just an old design that they just used in terms of marketing, but that is really confusing to me though. Even though I understand completely that people use concept arts for marketing purposes, this image is still very different from this robot. And I still don't know what to do with this. My theory is that this event is probably decades or even centuries after this event right here. The game might be split in two parts. You have this first part with this character and a second part where a new character kicks in and, finds this robot, right? And it's a completely different character. Potentially this robot got engulfed by nature itself. Now the purple explosion, and I want to talk about Dorman's origin. Nomad Colossus actually came with a very interesting thought that I actually just find very poetic in a sense. He believes, at the very least right now, this is all speculation, obviously, but he believes that, these black things that are coming in after this massive explosion or whatever it is, he believes that these could actually be the origin of Dorman. This could actually potentially be the black substance that is associated with Dorman, and it seems like it's coming in and devastating this land. There might be something there in terms of just visuals and aesthetics, like a dual message there. I actually think this is pretty cool if that is the case. Right now, I don't really believe that to be the case though, because, we see here that the robot is being hit by a bunch of massive debris that they do seem to be this, right? I actually went out of my way to try and recreate the scene. Obviously, it's nowhere near as good, obviously. It was just a quick recreation of the scene just to see what the effect of the lighting is. And as you can see, the lighting is so dim on all of these characters, right? That you only really have the lighting coming in from this part of the scene, right? All of these things that I put here are super dark. But if I actually fly around and go to this is just a simple particle system that I did. You can tell that these are actually just a bunch of rocks, right, that I put here. I just don't think this is any sort of black substance, but there might be a dual message there at the very least for sure. Now, regarding the color of the explosion, I talked to you guys about this, that this potentially looks like a nuclear explosion, but, I don't believe this is a nuclear explosion. I think this produces the equivalent of a nuclear explosion. I was actually looking at a lot of, Studio Ghibli stuff, and I noticed something very particular, which is whenever there is any sort of energy going on in any of the movies, at least, these are from Castle in the Sky and Nausicaa. And these particular two movies, at the very least, whenever there's any sort of energy glowing or something, it's always in this blue cyan sort of color. And whenever an energy source comes up that has a killing intention, it always appears with this sort of purplish, pinkish color, which is very curious because when you compare with all of these games, not only the trailer, not only Project Robot, you can actually see that these games actually do the exact same thing, right? Blue and cyan are two colors that are basically a representation of light, and with pink being a representation of a dangerous sort of light. Or, when the creature of Trico tries to attack the boy, his eyes actually turn pink. Or, for example, when in The Last Guardian, when the boy actually destroys the Master of the Valley, you can actually see this pinkish, purplish color on the background, which indicates a sort of dangerous situation going on, right? because the nest is actually falling apart. Or for example, in Aiko, you also have when you fight the queen, or when you hit her sphere, that is actually really similar to Master of the Valley here. You get like this sort of pinkish purplish color. Whatever this explosion is, I do believe that the purplish color is absolutely an aesthetics choice that follows along this line of thinking from the previous games. Still on the case of Dorman, actually, I believe there is a parallel to be made, at the very least, with Dorman and its power with the idea of evil that is present in Berserk. To keep it simple, the idea of evil is essentially a god in the world of Berserk, or at least it was until the chapter was removed by Kentaro himself. It's a mass of all the negative emotions of humanity that is made manifest in the astral world. And there are times where this idea of evil grants a sort of evil power to specific people under specific conditions. But under the condition that those people are willing to make a huge sacrifice. And if you ask me, there's absolutely a parallel here to be made with the Queen, the Master of the Valley, and Wander, who becomes Dorman, right? These were three characters that wanted to maintain their reality and were desperate to do so. And they found Dorman as the answer for that. And they were willing to basically sacrifice everything. In the case of the Queen and Master of the Valley, they were more than willing to sacrifice the lives of children. And in the case of Wander, he was basically willing to sacrifice the entirety of the region and the tribes around that area. All that I'm trying to say here is that maybe there's something regarding Japanese mythology about this, because I see a lot of this sorts of themes in Japanese art. I've actually been replaying Okami a little bit and seeing a lot of the scenes there, and I kind of noticed that Amaterasu, who is the main character, used this sort of disc on his back, right? And this disc is kind of the same sort of disc that the boy uses in order to defeat the Master of the Valley. I was really surprised by this. I never really noticed this. It's been a long time since I've played these games, really. And so I was like, wait, what's going on here? And I found Japanese mythology that I don't really know much about, to be dead honest. And the only thing that I want you to know about it is sun goddess Amaterasu. Amaterasu is one of the most important figures in Japanese mythology, and it's basically the central figure in Okami. Now, I don't really know how she manifests her powers, to be dead honest, but she basically has the power to, raise the sun, I guess, or something along those lines, right? She effectively uses the power of light. But apart from that, she gifted to her grandson, called the Ninigi no Mikoto, the three sacred treasures of Japan. And those were a mirror, a sword, and a jewel that are still to this day considered not only part of the imperial lineage of Japan, but they also became a symbol for the Japanese people. And the one thing that is curious about these games is that you constantly see this. I feel like the boy, Aiko, and Wander are all to a certain extent a representation of Amaterasu. These are three boys that come to this land in order to save it from some sort of evil. In the case of Wander, though, this is actually a little bit different, because he comes to this land and he wreaks havoc into the land than he does good, right? In this case, he's more of a Susanoo, but But what's interesting is that, the boy uses a mirror in order to defeat the Master of the Valley, and this mirror emits this light. Aiko uses the sort of light that has this electrified power and uses the sword in order to defeat the Queen. And Wander also uses the sword to find its way to the next Colossus and defeat them. A lot of representations, for example, this is an image from the Aiko, which is a massive door opening, which is very close to this mirror representation. And I'm actually wondering, in this next game, we already have a representation of a mirror and a sword at the very least, but we don't really have of a jewel. And I wonder if in this next game we might see that representation. This is from the movie A Castle in the Sky, where this jewel is a jewel of immense power that basically controls the castle and the robots that reside in it. Yes, Castle in the Sky has robots. Castle in the Sky is a movie from Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli, and it's a great little movie that I absolutely recommend you to go and watch. And Castle in the Sky talks a lot about this whole idea of Atlantis that I mentioned to you guys. It's about these two orphans that have this dream of finding this floating island that supposedly has this ancient civilization, right? It's with a city called Laputa. By the way, if you're Portuguese or Spanish, this name, Laputa, is a beautiful name. I'm not going to lie to you. And if you see the movie, you end up finding out that, they go to this island and they see that not only this island has been completely abandoned, but it also has a ton of high technology associated with it, right? This is them inside the castle already. And, see all of these patterns and everything around, right? Which is associated with this sort of like super high technological sort of civilization, right? You can actually see that Okami and The Last Guardian at the very least, and I think Aiko also, really got inspired, in my view, by this movie, I feel like. At least visually and aesthetically speaking, when it comes to speaking about this sorts of like high technological civilization that has been decayed and no longer exists. I don't know. These games are two games that are very similar in that sense, at the very least. And Castle in the Sky also has this whole thing that Nausicaa also has, which is this sense of a protection of nature. In the Castle of the Sky, there is this robot that lives in the castle that is basically protecting the entirety of the nature that is flourishing in there. And Nausicaa is also a movie that, a lot of people have been talking about with good reason to be a massive influence for Fumito Ueda. Not only because of the post-apocalyptic nature of Nausicaa, but also because of the overall mood, of the overall aesthetics that are associated with this movie and Castle in the Sky. The whole story of Nausicaa actually starts a millennia ago in the current events. And to keep it simple, a millennia ago, before the events of Nausicaa the movie, there were these giant warriors that were controlled by the civilization that were used as a weapon of mass destruction. They basically ended up destroying the entire civilization at the time. There is even this scene in the movie where you see a remnant of that warrior and you see the amount of destructive power that this creature actually has, even for a brief moment. But what's curious about this whole thing is after that event a millennia ago, nature actually took care of the situation, so to speak, and kind of declared war to humanity. And so what it did is that all of these massive insects called homs are effectively now protecting something called the Sea of Decay that humanity now wants to take control of. But they are protecting that Sea of Decay because deep, deep underground, nature is essentially healing itself through different means. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it's healing, right? What nature is afraid of is that if humanity takes control again of the Sea of Decay, it will destroy everything once more. Now, is this going to be the theme that is going to be spoken in this game? Who the hell knows? The only thing that I'm saying is that I'm seeing a pattern here, right? I'm seeing a pattern of themes and influences that have already transported themselves into Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, and The Last Guardian to a certain extent. And I have no doubt in my mind that all of these ideas will once again be represented in this game. And last but not least, I want to mention Mazinger Z. That was brought to me by these two beautiful people. Mazinger Z is a show, a very old anime show that is basically like a mech show. I believe it was like the first mech show. And Diamond Metal actually mentioned how Pilder, which is basically the command center for the robot that is located all the way up in the head of the robot, the command center can basically detach itself from the robot, right? And even the design itself is like incredibly similar to the head of the robot, especially when it goes off, right? I remember in my last video that I mentioned that this picture specifically had this robot figure, whatever it was, and it felt like it was like a bronze golden figure that had nothing to do with the robot from the trailer, and I could not make it what it was, right? But actually, Ale came out and said that this is Aphrodite A from Mazinger Z, and it does seem at the very least design-wise to be very similar to the female robot present in Manzinger Z. Now, the one thing that I didn't notice from this is that, this is a golden figure, and I didn't find any sort of figure from Aphrodite that feels like extremely golden. And to be honest with you, this kind of reminded me of Metropolis, which is a German movie from the 1920s that I would absolutely recommend to watch if you have not seen this. This is one of the greatest movies of the 20th century. Who knows, maybe we actually have a tale similar to Maria, where, you have this human that becomes a robot, but it's still human, right? In its nature, if it became a robot. Is it not? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. And I've remember talking a lot about this character and this heavy breathing that we hear, even though the entirety of the body is still robotic. And so the question arises, is this character remotely human whatsoever? I don't know. The one thing is for sure, the dude breathes. That's all we know, right? Okay. Oh my God. I hope this wasn't a complete bombardment of information regarding this goddamn trailer. I just wanted to throw to you guys a bunch of information regarding this whole thing, of things that I believe are relevant to the overall idea of what Fumito Ueda, Gen Design, and the entirety of the team are trying to build here. I think Hayao Miyazaki is an insane inspiration for Fumito Ueda. I think Japanese mythology and Shinto religion most likely are huge influences that I simply can't really even comprehend, because I just don't really know much information about Japanese mythology. Other old animes like Manzinger Z are definitely there, and probably many other more influences that inspired this guy to make some of the best games that are out there. Just like any great creator, Fumito Ueda grabs a bunch of different influences that he loves and just smashes them all together in order to create something great. And I think that's what we're seeing here, most definitely, right? I do believe that this game is going to talk a lot about the same subjects that the 3 previous games have talked about. This whole deal of nature versus technology, it seems like it's most definitely going to be a big push here, especially if we take into account the massive inspiration that is behind Castle in the Sky and Nausicaa. I want to believe, at the very least, that this is a sort of origin story to everything that happened in The Last Guardian, Ico, and specifically Shadow of the Colossus, in the sense that all of the cultures that we see in these past 3 games most likely have been heavily influenced in terms of architecture, design, way of thinking, on this old civilization that has become a myth to all of these civilizations, because that is most likely what happened to us and we don't even know. But yeah, I will stop my rambling. Let me know what you think about all of this if anyone sees this video. But yeah, if you like this video, subscribe and have a good one. See ya.